chance to finally get the podium. Rabbi Kagan will be speaking in about 20 minutes. So unfortunately, Rabbi Kluchak was unable to be here. Rabbi Eisenstadt is similarly indisposed. So we're doing a call Shabbos this coming week, so we decided to just kind of start things out Sunday. Kolel Shabbos meeting that the Kolel is going to kind of take the place, or not take the place, but kind of train in and see where they can end up in terms of copying, the rabbis. So, without further ado, I just want to thank the sponsors of the food, the Spielvogel family, the Dr. and Mrs. Reich family, and the Grunner family. And it's a great pleasure to have Rabbi Kagan here. I'm an incredibly deep fan of his. I hope that tonight everyone will be able to see what his really unique ability in terms of grounding Jewish thought and Jewish idea is. It's a cover to hear from you.
First of all, thank you for all coming out on a blustery day. It's pretty late, so kol hakavod that you could all be sleeping or eating at this point. So the fact that you're here, thank you very much. Thank you, Shmuley. Without his aggressive efforts, I wouldn't find myself here tonight. And I also want to thank the shul and whoever it was. Obviously, those of you who contributed to food, which is very dear to my heart, probably more than the class, but that's priorities. But they also the Rabbanim of the shul and those that were responsible for sponsoring the lecture at all. So thank you all for making this possible, and thank you all for coming. Theoretically, my reason for doing this is I just came out with a new book. I like to think there's a lot of things in here. What we're going to be touching on is something which is sort of a parallel to some of the stuff that's in the book. We'll sort of point out some of the things where it connects up to what's in the book. This particular one, the first half, analyzes the process by which human thought is developed, making Emunah so difficult. It's a theme that's been in all my other books also. This one takes a slightly more intellectual approach and has a very sharp understanding of the distinction between Greek thought and Torah. And then the second half is an analysis of the plagues, of the Makot, the miracles of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of the Exodus, trying to understand exactly how it is, what are we supposed to be deriving from studying this, and what are we supposed to be learning from it. That's this book. This is the previous book, which is also, I think, dear to my heart. It does not have the part about the plagues in it. This, I'd say, is a more philosophical work, but more directly philosophical. They both. It's a segula to have a copy of each one in every room. So just if no, that's a segula for me, if not for you, whatever. Yeah. Okay. Really what we're talking about tonight is Pesach. It's Rosh Chodesh was yesterday, so it's actually even a little late to get started on the topic. But my goal in the trip, I've been speaking in a few places these last 2 weeks, is to try and give over what I hope will be for you a slight deepening to your understanding of what the holiday is, or at least to participate in your process of going deep into the Chag. And whenever I start a class on Pesach, I like to make a certain point first, which really has to do with the Sipur, with the story. We have an obligation to tell over the story of the Exodus on the Seder night. That actually gives us a big advantage trying to understand what the holiday is all about. Usually we're looking at some arcane action that we're doing and trying to fathom what that's all about to give us some insight into what the Chag is, waving your lulav and your esrog and things like that, which is a lot of fun, but doesn't really necessarily immediately tell you what it's about. Pesach, we have the advantage that one of the mitzvah of Sipur, is actually a mitzvah of understanding. So that would seem like the shortcut to understanding what the holiday is about. The problem is when you try to understand what it is you're supposed to understand, it actually is a little bit confusing. What are we trying to understand when we tell over the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim? And the reason why it gets complicated is because the Rambam, when he comes to define the mitzvah, he uses the following words. He says, the mitzvah's aseh shel Torah, it's a positive obligation of the Torah, L'saper benisim v'niflos shenasu la'avoseinu b'Mitzrayim. To tell over the miracles and wonders that were done for our forefathers in Egypt. There's something missing here. Where this is describing the mitzvah of telling over the story of the Exodus, of leaving Egypt, and he managed to leave out leaving Egypt from his description of the mitzvah. When he comes to tell us how we fulfill it, and he does start talking about the Exodus, when he defines the actual mitzvah itself, his language is that we're obligated to talk about the miracles and wonders that were performed during that period. It seems to be flipping. Normally we would think what we're supposed to do is we're supposed to talk about leaving Egypt. That would seem pretty obvious, and the miracles and wonders are the means by which it's accomplished. But the Rambam flips that around and says what we're really talking about is the miracles and wonders, and the means of experiencing those miracles and wonders was the Exodus from Egypt. So what's really going on over here? So I think the easiest place to turn for insight is actually the Ramban. There's a famous Ramban in the end of Parshas Bo, where he comes to explain why it is that Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Exodus, is mentioned in so many places, so many mitzvahs, we're always recalling it. What the Ramban tells us is because as a result of experiencing the miracles and wonders during the Exodus, from that we derive our emunah. It's the basis of our faith and recognition of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Basically, says the Ramban, if material existence was the basis of existence, then the laws of nature would be the most basic structure of existence. And if that was true, violations of natural law would not be possible. That's basically the approach of the Greeks, and for the most part of Western culture as well. Says the Ramban, once you experience miracles, you immediately become aware that there are other forces at work besides the laws of nature. When those miracles are systemic, as they were in the case of the Exodus, then we recognize the laws of nature actually exist in a larger context. And when those miracles are directed and purposeful, then we become aware that there's an entity behind those miracles, and that brings us to the idea of the Creator. So anyway, says the Ramban, the miracles and wonders are the essence of what leaving Egypt is all about. And the reason why we experience them, and why it's so important, is because through the experience of those miracles, we come to our emunah and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. To take it just one step deeper, which will be helpful for us a little bit later on in the class, is if you understand the world is material is the basis, and then therefore natural law is sort of the structure of things, then basically we experience the world as an amoral place. That's not to say you can't find meaning, but you certainly can't find meaning in the way the world is actually functioning. Once you start experiencing miracles and recognizing, again, they're directed and purposeful, and recognize there is some force behind that, then suddenly instead reality becomes a medium for relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Right, and basically what we're saying over here, I'd just take that one point further, is we can turn to Lashon HaKodesh to understand this idea a little bit more. In Hebrew, what's the term for thing? How do you say thing in Hebrew? Davar, right? The word davar we translate as thing, but davar also means speech, right? So why is it that the word for thing is actually speech? What was really being communicated to you by the Hebrew language at its deepest level is we're supposed to understand the world not as peopled with neutral objects, but rather we should understand reality as words in a conversation with the Creator. Think how differently that would change the way we experience life and our engagement with reality if we would understand that everything that's happening and every element in that world is actually a word in a conversation with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. But essentially, when the Rabbi tells us that our worldview is revolutionized by the experience of the miracles in Egypt, what he's saying is that our connection to reality becomes a medium of relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. That now what comes out from this now, we return to the Rambam, who tells us when we're telling over the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of leaving Egypt, we need to talk about the miracles and wonders. What he's actually telling us is the story is not a departure from the physical confines of a country. And it also not the story of a departure from a political system which was oppressive. What he's telling us is we're leaving a superficial engagement of reality and entering into a deeper level where we recognize that reality is actually a medium through which we communicate with a deeper... We're basically leaving one level of reality and going deeper. That's what it really means to leave Mitzrayim. And that's why the story is really about a recounting of the miracles rather than merely a description of the physical departure. Step one, okay? Ready, get set, go. We're together. Step two. This actually is problematic for us because we don't experience these revealed miracles anymore. They're just not part of our reality. I mean, we just passed Rosh Chodesh Nisan. That means 2 weeks ago we were celebrating Purim, and Purim is all about the fact that we don't have them in our world anymore, and Purim is really how we gain the skills to maintain our emunah and develop it on whatever level we can within the context where we don't have these open miracles anymore. However, right, Purim's over, and now we're back to Pesach, right? And Pesach, the Rambam tells us, what are we supposed to be focusing on? We're supposed to be talking about the miracles and wonders, and what does the Ramban tell us? That actually the basis of our emunah is the fact that we experience these miracles and wonders. We come back to Pesach now. Pesach remains the basis of our faith and relation with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, in spite of the fact that these miracles and wonders aren't around, and yet that's what Pesach is really all about. And if we're going to get anything out of it, we need to somehow make this a reality for ourselves. And it would be difficult for us to say that we're not affected by the fact that we don't experience these miracles and wonders. We may believe in these miracles and wonders, but if we do, what it means is they're part of what I would describe as our hashkafic reality. They're sort of part of maybe our philosophical perspective. But I don't think we could really understand that they're part of what we might call our historical actuality. And I have a simple proof for that, which is, when you go to the Seder, wherever you're going to go, presumably a 5-year-old girl will be located who will be told to recite the plays which she will do to the tune of a nursery rhyme. Dam Tzvardei Yakinim Orech Dever Shchin. We can do it in English, but it just doesn't work. But whatever. Anyway, yeah, she's going to sing them. And when she's done, we'll pinch her cheek and say how cute she is. But if we would think about it, what she's really saying is, they dropped the atom bomb on Hiroshima, and they firebombed Dresden, killing 150,000 people. Oh, how cute! Right? It's like, hello. We're not callous. In fact, we're not allowed to be callous like that. Why is it that we can say, oh, sweet, is because on whatever level we believe it happened, we don't really believe it historically in the same sense as we accept history. And it's not just the fact that it happened a long time ago. If you're incredibly nerdy, you may be aware of the fact that Alexander the Great conquered the Persian Empire approximately 2,500 years ago, and at the Battle of Gaugamela, his army defeated an army 5 times the size of his. Right? And if you're into these kind of things, you can relate to something like that as a historical fact, because even though he did something so remarkable, it was not miraculous. We know that Alexander was a strategic genius. In fact, we even know the strategy that he used to win that war. We can make it part of our history, even though it's distant in time. The difference is by Egypt is it is miraculous. In fact, the only reason we would need to remember it is because it's miraculous, and that fact makes it disconnected from our sense of history, because we are so much ingrained, so much enmeshed in a view of reality that really doesn't recognize the possibility for miracles. So if that's the case, my presenting question for the evening is, how do we make Pesach a genuine and relevant experience for us? Meaning, how can we take it beyond almost the mythical and really make it part of our reality, which is, I think, an important goal, because ultimately we're looking at this as the foundation of our emunah. So that's the presenting question. Stop. Ready, get set, go. We're all together? Yes, no? I feel like I'm asking you to come out to vote or something. It's hopeless, whatever. Okay, fine.
In 3 lines, you're proving that it's possible for a person to take incredible events and really make it a part of themselves, and yet we don't have that by
Yetzias Mitzrayim,
Mitzrayim.
specifically because the whole point that we're trying to emphasize with it, the reason we're trying to engage it, is because it was a miraculous experience, because that's the basis, that its role in our consciousness is the basis of our emunah. It's the basis of our emunah because it was a miraculous experience, and yet that very fact is the thing that makes it so difficult to integrate it into us, which is what we really need to do. Yeah.
Is this the point where you're taking some questions?
As long as yes.
Okay.
But yeah, my main point is I want to know that we're all together before we move forward. We have a lot to, but we just keep in mind we have a lot to cover.
Miracles defy the natural law of science, okay? And not only did we see the miracles, but the Egyptians, in a negative way, felt the wrath of those miracles, okay, or plagues. Did they accept them also as miracles? I mean, except for Yisro, who said, you know, I saw what happened in Egypt, and now I'm a believer, okay? Did the Egyptians believe that these were miracles and accept them and make a peace treaty with
Very
the Israelites
interesting, different,
now?
very interesting, different class. Okay, yeah. I mean, the answer to you, yes, they were miraculous, but no, they were not capable of accepting what the point was because it went completely counter to the nature of their very identity as a people. But this is a different class. Yeah, go ahead.
So it's all about the experience. What about those that actually experienced it? Did exit Egypt? Well, some small percentage of them after all the miracles, and after that continued building a golden calf and all that stuff. After experiencing all the miracles. So what's the point for us? You know, if they experienced it and they still continued sinning and doing all that stuff.
Also, an excellent question. A different class in one sentence. Right, the golden calf was not a denial of the existence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. It was an attempt to reframe the nature of the relationship based on circumstances they were experiencing. Interesting point, important class, but not this class. Yeah, last question.
It's always been presented that Rambam and Ramban argue on the concept of miracles. Does Rambam agree that at the time of Exodus there were actually things that happened that violate natural law? Or does he try to explain natural law?
Well, I mean, you hear in the language of the Rambam that we need to remember the miracles and wonders that we experienced in Egypt, that he definitely recognized that something's happening there. You are making an important point that the way that the Rambam and the Ramban relate to this experience is different. The way they come, what I'm saying here, that it's a basis of our emunah, they come to it through different paths, but ultimately they will come to the same point that much of our emunah is founded on these experiences. I can show you the sources on that, but that would take us to a slightly more specific level than what we're really trying to achieve now. But your point is a valid point. Okay, ready, set, go?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's we've now identified a 5-lecture series that comes out of the introduction to our class. Let's see if we can we can take this a little bit further. But again, I can show you the sources on those. Okay, fine. So this is all about getting out of Egypt and what it means to get out of Egypt. There's a very interesting Rashi in Bamidbar that says the splitting of the sea took place on the 8th day of Pesach. The problem with that is it didn't. It took place on the 7th day of Pesach. So when Rashi says it's the 8th day of Pesach, what he's really telling us is Pesach doesn't begin on the 15th of Nisan like we think. It really starts on the 14th of Nisan. Why is he saying that? Because that's the day on which the Korban Pesach was offered. That moment actually really marks the point when the Jews officially left Egypt in the sense that we're talking about it now, because that was the moment when the Jews did the Korban Pesach, the Paschal offering, was the first Korban, the first sacrifice offered by the Jewish people. In Hebrew, an offering is called avoda, service. The word avoda, the person who does avoda is the eved, is the servant. Basically, through offering this lamb, we inaugurated ourselves into the service of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, which is really everything that we're talking about over here. That's the moment when the relationship that we've been talking about really begins, where we really become a part and connected to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So it makes sense that the Korban Pesach not only marks the beginning of the departure from Egypt, but it's really the birth of the Jewish people, effectively, because we are the people, we're defined as people around that relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So it makes sense that Korban Pesach should be the first mitzvah that was ever given to the Jewish people. It makes sense. The problem is, again, it's wrong. It wasn't the first mitzvah. There was a mitzvah that we were given. The mitzvahs are basically the structure of the relationship, so if that's the relationship, it should start there. No, there was a mitzvah that comes before it. What's the mitzvah that comes before it? Rosh Chodesh. What you understand from that is if the inauguration of the relationship comes with the Korban Pesach, and there's a mitzvah that comes before that, it must be that mitzvah is actually the preparation to be able to enter into that relationship. And in fact, the Rosh Chodesh is the mitzvah through which the ancient Jewish people that were leaving Egypt broke the yoke of slavery, broke that yoke of being defined around a natural world, which opened them to enter into this relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And in fact, that's the role that this mitzvah plays also for us as we come through our own calendar, recapitulating this whole historical experience. Rosh Chodesh, it turns out, is the key to giving us a window on entering into this, what we might call the world of Nace, the world of miracle, the world of relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. That's what I want to try. That's what we want to try and work on this evening. Now, the truth is, on a certain level, the fact that Rosh Chodesh, everybody knows what the mitzvah is? Rosh Chodesh? Define or go? The new moon? Yes? No? Again, I can see you're a really tough crowd here. Take it away, Johnny. Okay, whatever. Yeah, what? That was a really old culture. Okay, what? Yeah.
Speak of that.
So we have a mitzvah where the first mitzvah in the Torah was to recognize the new moon, which is obviously instrumental in offering the Paschal offering, because we need to know when the first day of the month is to be able to define when all the other days when things are taking place are happening. On a very practical level, we need to do that. Basically, I'm supposed to recognize the first moment when in the lunar month that we see a new light coming off of the moon, that signals the start of the new month. So that was actually the first mitzvah, to recognize the beginning of the month of Nisan, and from that we can know when to do everything that we have to do for the Korban on the 10th day, on the 14th day. But my point is that actually this mitzvah is not only practically the basis of bringing this Korban, but it's also what we might call the philosophical. It enters us into a reality that allows us to come into this relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, which we're saying on a certain level is dependent upon miracles. And at a certain level, I think that it really should be clear, because the sun, the solar calendar, which was the primary calendar in Egypt up until this time, the solar calendar is one where time is relentless and unchanging, right? Everything is completely predictable from the very beginning. You know exactly where everything is going. The sun was created in order to structure time, and the time that it structures is one which is absolutely changeless. It really creates the proper context within which to relate to the world as a purely natural place where everything is working like a clock and everything is sort of, at one moment is caused by the next, right? And in fact, the sun is symbolic of the natural world. We see that, for example, in Shir Shirim. But what we call a solar time frame. Again, we live with the solar time frame, and it works very well for us as having a very natural way of looking at the world. But when we go to a lunar time frame, we're entering into a reality which is structured in a completely different way, and in fact, a reality which invites an awareness of miracles, if you want to put it that way, in the sense that the moon rises up to a certain height, and then it brings to shrinks down. It disappears completely, and suddenly a new moon comes out, something completely disconnected from the previous moon. So Rosh Chodesh really trains us to relate to time as a series of new beginnings, which is completely different from the whole concept of nature. The whole concept of nature is every moment is caused, it's determined by the previous moment, and the lunar rhythm is one of constant renewal, a complete break with the past and a rebirth, if you want to put it that way. But not only that, another element of the idea of the lunar calendar, especially the way that Torah commands us to relate to it, is man determines it, which is a totally different way of relating to time. Again, nature is always experienced as an amoral, indifferent reality, which is completely indifferent to humanity and works completely oblivious to the presence of humanity in the world, whereas the lunar calendar is actually determined. We actually participate in the determination of when is the first day of the month. And the rabbis even had the authority to manipulate the way they interviewed witnesses in order, if they had a specific reason for wanting to come out on a specific day. So here we have, in a certain sense, man taking control, participating. Very important to what we were saying before. The point we were making before is that essential to the whole idea of relationship, of relating to of the miraculous world, is that existence is a relationship between man and the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Right? The idea we said before that the world is full of dvarim, of words. Well, words are spoken by the speaker and understood by the listener. There's a relationship in terms of the understanding of the world is a consequence of a partnership between this creator and the creation, the speaker and the understander. Right? And here we see that coming out very, very neatly in the lunar calendar, in the sense that, again, we participate in the structure of the very reality that we're living in. So we're all finished. We're all set.
We always participate in the structure we live. We eat food, that's participating in the structure.
We don't structure the time. The time goes in, when it's a solar calendar, the time marches on regardless of what we do. I'm not talking about, I act in the world, but time is completely indifferent to everything I do when it's a solar calendar. But in the lunar calendar, man actually determines when the first of the month is. It's a totally different kind of a thing. Pardon me?
It's only a date for ritual purposes. The waxing and the waning of the moon also proceeds without asking our opinions.
But what day you're going to identify as that first, the rabbis were actually given the authority to manipulate the way they interview the witnesses. And I'm not saying we have complete control. We participate in the determination. What?
It's what we call it. We say, yes, this is the first day.
But once we say it, it is. And it changes what day the holidays will be on. In fact, that if we understand that each holiday actually has a unique relation, we understand that God actually emanates into the world in unique ways on the holidays. When we have determined the day of the holiday through which one we've identified as the first month, we're actually influencing the way He relates to the world also. That's what I'm saying. The whole thing comes out as a relationship. It's actually staggeringly important. But you all don't look so convinced that
It's been determined a long time ago.
Exactly. That's the point, which is,
We're no longer...
when we are in gullus, when we're in exile, why is this not impressive? Because the reality is, in our world, the whole thing is written out. You want to know what day of the month is? You're not waiting for somebody to come along through base. This was all written down long, long ago. I can predict, I will know with absolute precision what day of which month it will be 25 years from now. If I want to, it's all written down. We've lost, again, the way that it was done officially, it does have the participation of you, but we've lost any experiential quality to that lunar month that gives us this sense of a different rhythm of time which transcends the structure of nature. That was what we were saying, what we just said a moment ago, does have reality to it, but it's, in a certain sense, our sensitivity to it is lost because of the way we relate to it in exile. If we want to get to an aspect of the lunar calendar which is still relevant and retains its role as opening us to this different relationship to reality in the Kadosh Baruch Hu, we're going to have to dig deeper into understanding what Rosh Chodesh is really about and why that was specifically identified as the mitzvah which would unchain man from the natural world. Okay? So that's what, now I'm going to give you, scenes of coming attractions, I want to sort of outline where we want to go with this, and then we're going to try and get there. So first of all, Rosh Chodesh is a chag. It's a kind of a chag. It's a holiday. And just like, I mean, you see that this week we had Rosh Chodesh on Shabbos. And if you're paying attention in the Musaf davening, it was actually a Yontif davening. The language of it is the Yontif davening when Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbos. So you see that Rosh Chodesh has a Yontif, it has a chag quality to it. All al chagim, all the holidays celebrate or commemorate a certain event or actually a certain achievement or a certain aspect of our relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Each one of these holidays allow us to develop a unique facet of how we relate to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Right? So Rosh Chodesh also, as a chag, it is a celebration or commemoration of some element of our relation with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Specifically, and this we'll have to show, is that Chodesh is the celebration of man's achievement of free will. The fact that we have bechira, that we have free will, is really a consequence of Rosh Chodesh. We have to show that, right? But the point is, if you really understand what it means to truly choose, and this actually is, this happened to be lying here, for some reason I just picked it up without, but there's the quarter of this book is on Bechira, it's on free will. And this point is made very, very strongly in the course of the book, but the bottom line is to make a choice. What it means to choose by definition is it's an uncaused cause. Because if your choice is caused by something, it's not a choice. The whole idea of a choice is I stand above my circumstances. All the different influences were impinging upon me. I stand above them and say, regardless of those influences, the following action may not be convenient, but it actualizes who I truly am, and therefore I will do it. In other words, I stand above all the things that are going on around me, and I make a choice. Right? It's fundamental to all of Torah that humanity is capable of doing this. Again, you have to train yourself to be able to do it, but it's something we're able to do it. But by definition, that is achieving, it's a miracle, by definition. The point of a miracle is it's not caused by what happened before. It is a new beginning. Every choice is a new beginning. And if we could appreciate this most fundamental of human capabilities and appreciate just how miraculous it is, then we would understand that our lives are filled with miracles. We're surrounded by miracles, and it would open us to an appreciation for the genuine possibility of those being expressed in the world around us as well as inside of us. And this sort of ongoing theme for me, each year I usually have a theme. My theme this year is, it's not something new, but it was at least a new focus, that we can never truly appreciate, certainly from Bayis Sheni on, we can never truly appreciate Elokim if we don't appreciate Tzelem Elokim. Right? That is the window on the divine, is the depth of our humanity. And on the most fundamental level, the most divine of all capabilities in our humanity is the ability to choose. The only two beings that have the capability for doing that, for truly creating something new, is God and man. Elohim and Tzelem Elohim. Okay, that's where we want to go. That's what I want to do. And we're going to start by, we want to go deeply into, whenever you want to go deeply into a topic, I mean, I can ask my wife, but she's not here. But so if she's not here, then the thing to do is always go back to, that was a joke, went over as well as all the rest of them, but okay, fine, yeah. But anyway, you go back to the origin. The first time something appears in the Torah, that's the place to go to see the definitive expression of something. So we need to go to what we would call the point where Rosh Chodesh really comes into the world if we want to understand it. So for that, conveniently, we have a pasuk that really defines where it comes from. So in the creation story, when the psukim describe God creating the sun and the moon, it says the following: "Vayas Elokim et shtei ha'ma'orot ha'ma'oros hagedolim." And God made the two big lights. Es ha'ma'or hagadol l'memshalas hayom, the big light to rule over the day. Es ha'ma'or hakaton l'memshalas halayla, and the little light to rule over the night. Right? It's a very, very difficult pasuk. God made the two big lights, the big light to rule over the day, and the little light to rule over the night. Right? Chazal jump on this, right? What happened? Right? It starts out by saying that God created two big lights, and suddenly we're looking at it says he created two big lights, and then suddenly it's a big light and a little light, right? The problem in the pasuk is obvious. We turn to Chazal for one of the strangest agadas in all of Torah Shebaal Peh, and they tell the following story to explain this. They say when the sun and the moon were originally created, they were created the same size. And the moon complained to God, you can't have two kings for one crown. So God said, okay, make yourself small. To which the moon said, I had a legitimate claim. I got to make myself small. Which follows a series of God attempting to console the moon. And when he sees that the moon is inconsolable, he says, bring the korban chatas, the sin offering on Rosh Chodesh, as an atonement for me for making the moon small. End of Gemara. One of the most difficult, more in Kolel, one of the most difficult Gemaras in Torah Shebaal Peh. Now this, just to understand how we connect this up to what we're talking about, here is the origin of Rosh Chodesh for the following reason. The sun and the moon were originally created the same size. If it's the same size, then it can't wax and wane. But when we look out, we see that the moon does wax and wane. But the only way that could happen is if it's decoupled in size from the sun. So when God says to the moon, make yourself small, for reasons we do not yet understand, comes along with that the fact that the moon waxes and wanes. Okay? So here, without waxing and waning, you can't have Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh is a consequence of what just happened over here. Okay, everybody clear on that point? Repeat. Continue.
The moon is waxing away connected to its size.
We have to explain that. That remains to be explained. But we'll get there.
It could remain the same size and still wax and wane, you know?
No, because then it's not the same size.
No, why? No, it's waning just means what is visible on Earth.
That's all we're interested in. The Torah is not interested in like microbes. It's interested in the way the world presents itself to man.
And even still, at its largest size, it could have been the same size as the sun, and only become smaller.
Fine. We'll understand why. I told you, I'm not explaining why they go together. I'm just proving that they do. But we'll see why these two concepts come together a little bit later on. We will deal with it. Yeah.
So it's not a problem that the moon is not really a light?
The what?
That the moon is not really a light? And
It's fundamental to this that the moon is a reflecting light. We'll get
It's
there.
not a problem if a moon was the same size as the sun. It's impossible.
Again, we're not inviting astrophysicists here. I'm a simple Jew. I understand the problem. Pardon me?
It's how it looks in the sky.
But that's what we're interested in.
Okay. It doesn't look.
It's actually remarkable the fact that the sun and the moon are the same size. You can have such a thing as a solar eclipse. It's like one of the remarkable coincidences of creation. Whatever. Okay. Anyway, yeah.
Could you just repeat? I just didn't get how is it proved from the Medrash that it's dependent on this?
Because if the moon is the same size as the sun, it can't be waxing and waning. The sun doesn't wax and wane. It's the same size.
It's equal to the sun.
Yeah, that's Shnei Ma'aros Gedolim. The same two things, the same size.
And yet the sun waxes and wanes in another sense, depending on the season and the tilt of the earth.
In terms of how far away it is, in terms of the warmth that we
How high on the
feel.
horizon.
Right, but I'm saying that's not waxing and waning. How the height on the horizon is not the same thing. That's not the same
That's
thing.
a function of how warm it is.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that's not called waxing and waning as I see a moon that gets bigger and smaller. That I don't see in the sun. Okay. Now, pardon me, louder please. What?
How are you going to relate the direct quote from the Pasuk right there? L'chadashim v'shanim, why not just l'chadashim?
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, no, we'll see. Whoa, one second. Okay, anyway, just a word about Medrash. Medrash is Chazal's envelope for conveying abstract concepts. They don't convey, my personal belief is the reason why they don't want to give them in abstract form is because the whole point of Chazal is to invest physical experience with meaning. the fact that the two shouldn't be decoupled. When I relate to ideas abstractly, it's very easy to disconnect them from actual experience. So I personally believe the reason why Chazal were committed to always delivering these ideas in this form is because they want to maintain always the connection between ideas and some level of physical expression, whatever. But we have to understand that our job now is conceptually to dissect what they're really communicating to us with this medrash. Now, one other thing is, when they're doing this, they're actually trying to explain a certain aspect of creation. Now, what is the aspect of creation they're coming to explain? In the sun and the moon, what we have is the relationship between a source, a primary receiver who then conveys and represents the source. Yeah, okay, are we clear on that? Source, primary receiver, who then conveys as a representative of the source. That's what we are looking at, okay? Now, the reason why that's significant is because that reality is also the reality that describes the relation between God and man. So as we look at what's happening here between the sun and the moon, what's actually being analyzed are what might be described as the intrinsic tensions in that relationship and what is the ultimate resolution of those tensions. That's why this medrash is so important to us. Okay? Ready, get set, go. Everyone clear? Keep going? Go? Go. Okay, fine. Okay, so now we need to take this thing apart. God creates the sun and moon the same size. Moon complains, can't have two kings for one crown. Where does the moon get the idea that it's a king? Because the pasuk says they were created to rule the day and rule the night. Memshelet hayom, memsheles halayla, right? They are rulers, right? What does it mean that you can't have two kings for one crown? Because the king is not merely someone who enforces structure. The king is the source of that structure. That's what the term king in Hebrew, in Torah conceptually, what the king means, author of structure, the creator of structure, if you prefer, right? So, if two people are working together, then one is compromising with the other. They aren't the author of that structure. So to be king, can't have two kings and one crown. Okay, that clear so far? So now, if that's true, so who are the two kings in our case? We have the moon and the sun, which are both responsible for structuring time. Okay? Yeah? But if that's true, why is it that the moon is complaining? Why isn't the sun complaining? So the answer is because the sun is the source of the light. The moon reflects that light. If the moon is the same size as the sun, then who is determining the light that's coming to the world? By definition, it's the sun, because whatever the sun creates, the moon will convey. Right? So what you have here is a situation where the moon is effectively what we might call a living contradiction. It's clearly been given the role of kingship. And yet, it's missing the very essence of kingship. It seems to be the source of structure. It appears to be the source of structure, and yet it is determining nothing, which is the essence of what it is to be a king. It's a living contradiction, which is why the moon is complaining, right?
When and by whom was it determined that the moon is just a reflector?
What?
When was it determined and by whom that the moon is just a reflector?
You've heard of God? You've heard of God?
No, he's saying that
Humans. When did humans understand that the moon is just a reflector and not the source of light?
I mean, we're reading Torah right now. Human beings aren't even in the picture yet.
Is it written in the Torah that the moon is just a reflector?
I will admit to you that there is one Rishon that does not assume from the beginning that it was a reflector. There is one. But everybody else understands that what it really means to be moon is to be a reflector.
If they understood it was just a reflector,
that people didn't know the moon was the reflected light in the ancient world? What you're saying is very surprising to me, but it's not for us
We
now.
still don't perceive it that way.
We-
If the way humans perceive light is the way we should look at things, so then we don't perceive it as a reflector. It's irrelevant to us if it's a reflector or not, right?
I mean, it's essential to understanding that the moon is always understood to be a reflecting light as opposed to the sun. This is crucial to all of our understanding. Because the significance of the moon relative to the sun is completely surrounds this idea. This goes very, very deep. Very deep, very, very deeply understood that way. Let's keep going for a moment. Yeah. So says the sun, make yourself small. So what happened? The moon complained, you don't like the way you do things? Whap! Is that what's happening here? He's getting a punishment? That can't be. It's clear from the Gemara, not like that. Because the moon says to God, my claim was legitimate. How come I have to become small? Right? And the God then tries to console the moon, ultimately saying, let me have an atonement that I made this moon small. It's clear that this isn't a punishment. Well, it's not a punishment, then what is it? So the answer is, again, we still haven't answered why, but we'll get there in a minute. Once the moon begins to wax and wane, what's happened is a new malchus, a new kingdom has been created. In other words, in the original creation, there's only one question to ask. How much light is created? That's it, because the moon reflects it all. But once the moon waxes and wanes, there are two questions to ask. How much light is available? And of that light, how much is the moon going to convey into the world? There's a new decision that has been entered into the whole process. There's a new malchus, there's a new kingdom that's at work. So effectively what's happened is God has answered the problem of the moon. The moon says, I've been given the role of a king and I left the essence of kingship, which is I don't determine anything. So God has now given the moon the ability to determine something. A new kingdom has been created. But the moon turns around and says, look, you solved that problem, but look what you've taken away from me. I clearly is coming to me a glory on the level of the sun itself, and you have to take that away from me to give me what was ultimately, I needed. You created me this way. What you did to me was not reasonable. I pointed it out, and now the only way you can resolve the issue is by taking this away, what's rightfully my due. It's clear that it's rightful that I should shine on the level of the sun, and you have to take that away from me. It says, God, bring an atonement for me that I made the moon small through the sin offering on Rosh Chodesh. What does that mean? What? In other words, somehow this sin offering on Rosh Chodesh seems to resolve all the contradictions, what's going on over here. So let's plug back in the whole back and forth here into the other arena in which we would understand that it would take place, which is move from the source, primary receiver conveyor of the sun to the moon, to the source, primary conveyor, receiver conveyor, God and man. Where we see effectively exactly the same thing playing itself out. In the original creation, Adam shone so brightly that the Medrash says the angels mistook him for God and bowed down to him. In other words, whether you want to call it the wisdom or the light, I think the easy way to think about it, I don't know if you've ever met like a big tzaddik, right? Like there's a certain variety of tzaddik where literally light seems to come out of their faces, especially out of their eyes. Remember a number of ones that I met, even when they were very elderly, their eyes were alive and there was light that was coming out of them. It's called zivapanim. But whatever you want to understand the light that's shining out of Adam, or just understand that Adam has the full eminence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu on some level in the original creation, the reason why Adam had that is because there's Elokim and there's Selam Elokim. And in the original creation, Adam was sufficiently clean that Tselem Elohim shone through him unhindered. There was no ego there to abate the light of God that was shining through him. Right? He was created with the greatness of God. He's representing God. He is Melech B'Tachtonim. He is the king of the lower world, the order of the world, the master of the world, as a representative of God. Right? He's created in this way. But Adam has a small problem. He looks like a king. He acts like a king. But he's not determining anything. He's not determining anything. Yeah, because it's so obvious. The truth of everything and the greatness of God is so obvious. Who's going to disobey? Right? Man did everything he was supposed to effectively, automatically, because everything was so clear. So now man is acting as God's representative, appearing as God's representative, and yet he lacks on the most essential level the nature of God, which is God is a creator. He's a king. He's a determiner. And ultimately, man was only a conveyor because he was so clean. He's caught in the same contradiction that the moon was caught in. So what was the solution? Make yourself small. Right? Through eating from the Eitz Hadas, so that's a whole class in its own right, but through the sin, the transgression, suddenly he clouds his recognition of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? It's interesting that the Medrash actually, the Gemara actually says he was shrunk in size as a result of it. It says the Medrash, he originally stood on the ground and reached all the way to the heavens, and afterwards he was shrunk down to, I think it was 200 amas. But whatever, I'm just saying, make yourself small, right? But now, as a result of the fact that Adam no longer sees HaKadosh Baruch Hu so clearly, now he has to exercise his free choice whether or not to obey God. When he's obeying God, and he's close to Kadosh Baruch Hu, effectively God shines through him greatly. And when he turns away from Kadosh Baruch Hu and conveys less of God into the world, he shines with less. He's effectively man. In other words, man achieves free will by clouding his vision of Kadosh Baruch Hu. Once that's clouded, the whole point of it is that he should be making choices now. He should be a creator and a determiner, but choice is not meaningful unless you're capable of making mistakes and choosing incorrectly also. So it introduces the whole idea of sin and transgression also. Man can turn towards God, man can turn away from God. He can effectively shine brightly, he can wax and he can wane. Effectively, right? That's effectively what happened. Man is now waxing and waning. He's got exactly the same thing. He's now achieved some level of essential emulation of God, but at the cost of no longer reflecting God into the world fully. What resolves all of these? The sin offering of Rosh Chodesh. Let's ask ourselves for a sec, just a moment. Here's the key point. The way we're describing things, Rosh Chodesh for the moon is equivalent to what for man? In other words,
Tshuva?
Exactly. It's the equivalent of repentance, of tshuva. Because I've been bringing less and less and less of the light of God into the world, and suddenly I've turned that around, and now I'm starting to bring more and more light of the world. Rosh Chodesh is the equivalent of tshuva. Tshuva is the ultimate exercise of the capability of free will. The Rambam has halachas about free will. Where does he place them? Hilchas Tshuva. Why? So what's the whole point of making a choice? Every time I make a choice, effectively I am determining who I am. Right? Do I want to eat? Do I want to order the third piece of chocolate cheesecake or give the money to tzedakah? The second piece, not even an issue. Right? That we're going to have. Right? That's reasonable. But the third piece, I decide, am I a taker or am I a giver? I give it to tzedakah, I turn myself into more of a giving person through that choice. I am determining myself, I'm creating myself. That is the significance of free will. That who I am is being determined by me. Every action in its own little way affects who I am. But there's one choice that doesn't affect me in a little way in terms of who I am. And that's the choice of tshuva. Because there the choice is, who am I? That is the very choice. Who am I? That's what tshuva is. I'm determined. The choice itself is, who am I? The ultimate expression of free will is tshuva. It's the reason why the chatas offering is always a throwaway in all the davening. Every musaf davening, we mention the chatas as just a passing word. On Rosh Chodesh, it's the entire focus of the davening, because that's what Rosh Chodesh is essentially about. It is the holiday of tshuva. It's the holiday of the exercise of free will. The reason why that's significant is, in this, man demonstrates on the deepest level, he actualizes within himself divinity. This is the quality through which we resemble the Baruch Hu. This is what's called Tselem Elokim, free choice. There is no other being in existence that can make a choice besides God and man. Man through his Tselem Elokim. We achieve the ultimate. We pare away all that's in us that blocks the actualization of God in the world through us to its deepest level when we genuinely choose. And that deepest choice is the choice of tshuva. My point is basically this: what are we? When we were given the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh, what Rosh Chodesh is all about is it's a commemoration, a celebration of the capability to choose. Every time we choose, we emulate God on the deepest level possible. We make a miracle. We create. We do something which is an uncaused cause. We act in a manner which is not a consequence of our past, but a decision in the present, a new beginning. If we could appreciate our own greatness, if we could appreciate our own sanctity, if we could appreciate our own divinity, which we're capable of seeing every day all around us, then we would understand that miracle is an essential element of creation, always was and always will be. When we can see it in ourselves, when we can appreciate that in ourselves, and the significance of what we're doing when we do it, then we're open to the fact that miracles are genuinely a possibility in the world around us also. And in that sense, Rosh Chodesh comes as the mitzvah which introduces us into the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. First Rosh Chodesh, and then we can accept upon ourselves the authority of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to enter into this relationship with Him in this totally different way, where reality itself becomes a medium of relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, rather than merely an empty, a moral set of physical principles. Yeah. Questions? Okay, now we can go for the questions. Now we go to the other 4 lectures we didn't do. Yeah.
Adam before.
Oh, wait, just I'm sorry, I don't know what your name is, but I answered your question. I answered your question of how it is that the waxing and waning is a consequence of being small. I couldn't show it to you in the mushal, but I showed it to you in the nimshal. It's because Adam becomes smaller and doesn't see clearly. That is what allows him to wax and wane, that his choices become meaningful. I just want to point that out. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Adam before he does the sin, what's the difference between him and a Malach?
So Adam had free choice, but it was a minimal aspect of the relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu at that point. What he really did through the chet was he made that the central element in the relationship. There are 2 different ways that the goal of creation is the relationship between man and God. There are 2 different kinds of relationship. The easiest way to understand it is in the metaphor of a mother with her daughter. Right? A mother with the daughter, when the daughter is an infant suckling from her, there is an immediacy and an intimacy there that's incomparable. There is a relationship there. But there's another relationship where that daughter grows up, becomes a mother in her own right, and then they go out to lunch together and they resonate with one another because the daughter understands the mother finally. Not talking about not using a four-letter word, adolescent that comes in between, whatever. Anyway, but the bottom line is, the first one is a relationship of yira, where the connection comes through the disappearance of self. The second one is a relationship of ava, where there are two there that resonate with one another. So the point is, in the original creation, God commanded man in that yira relationship, and man effectively chose now obviously in the year one also there's some choice, but question of how the balance between the two, how they define the relationship changed radically once he switched to the second version. Okay? Yeah.
Do you understand tshuva as an overarching decision, more than just the specific choices to do the right and wrong in?
Well, you have to. I mean, if you look at all the Mepharshim when they talk about the difference between tshuva as a specific act and the larger scale tshuva, when we talk about Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is really a redefinition of self. That's really what tshuva is on its most essential level. I mean, on a little level, that's really what's happening also. But you don't see
every time I change myself in a way that I won't do that avera, if it's a real change, I mean that changes myself.
Yeah, exactly. But that is definitely an act of creation also. I'm saying if you understand essentially what you're really on the deepest level, what you're doing is you're making a choice in yourself. We read too much more Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur to it, and of course we talk about the differences between like sort of a little tshuva and what we call sort of tshuva in its most essential form.
And Rosh Chodesh symbolizes the tshuva aspect in the human.
Right.
And just in terms of how it connects with the miracles, right?
Tshuva is a miracle because by definition, if you're making a choice, it's not being caused. You're not a reactor, you're an actor. If it's a reaction, it's not a choice. I have to stand above the fray, and I have to look at all these things, and this is easy, that's nice, but this is me. I'm going to do it because this is who and what I am. This actually
overcoming everything else is the miracle.
The miracle is that my action is not caused by those influences. I stand above them, and I choose, which means that my action it's an action, not a reaction. It's a beginning, not a consequence. If it's a consequence, it's not a choice. Now, obviously, there are all kinds of influences. But the point is, if I have in the essential choice aspect of it, I am making a decision independent of the influences. I'm doing it because I recognize that it's right. I do it because I recognize that it's the actualization of my truest self.
And that in and of itself is a miracle.
What?
And that in and of itself is a miracle?
By definition.
Because where did it come from?
By definition. A miracle means it's not caused by the past. Right? It is a miracle is a new beginning. Nature is always pushed from behind. A miracle is always being pulled towards purpose. It's not from the past, it's towards the future.
Aren't our choices influenced by our past?
Yeah, for sure, they're influenced, but ultimately the choice shabo, the chira shabo, is not, the past isn't influence, but the actual decision is not being caused by that. I have to stand above that. That can be a factor, but I have to stand above it and say, I'm doing this because that it's right.
Amen.
And the truth is, Gedolim, the whole point is Gedolim do this. We're not really trained to do this, but you're supposed to be trained to do this. This is really what we're supposed to be doing. Gedolim find opportunities to choose in every moment, and it's like, this is what I'm going to do because it's me, because it's right, because it's me. Yes, sir.
No, so you're saying that the fact that tshuva, the tshuva is that because the tshuva is specifically a departure from what you were. Meaning,
if you didn't depart,
right?
Yeah, if you didn't depart, then it wasn't a choice.
Right, the truth, right? Because the truth is, it's not really influence. When you choose, you're moving away from what you were in your past,
right.
And you're choosing a new entirely.
Especially when it's tshuva, especially when the choice is tshuva. The whole point is, I am changing the way that I was. That's how I was acting. I'm going to now do something different. I'm breaking off from that past and starting a new beginning.
Let's say you choose to do the wrong thing.
That's in the book. Okay, that's a whole class in its own right. You read the book, you know the answer to that question. You get that far? What have you been doing with your time?
Right,
I'll give you a very. You're not going to. I really. This requires a whole treatment, but I'm going to say it to you very, very quickly. That when we use the term choice, it's a poor term. because we mix it up with a lot of different things. First of all, if you go to the restaurant and you have to choose between apple pie and pecan pie, you think you're making a choice. That's not a choice. All you're doing is measuring the bigger yetzer. That's all. That's not a choice. Choice always has a moral capacity to it. And the essence of the choice, why am I choosing it? Because I see in this action I actualize myself. This is who I am. I recognize the neshama should be, and I act because this is the right thing to, this is me, not based on the other things. The wrong choice means what I'm actually doing is I'm following my yetzer. I'm not actualizing myself. I'm actually surrendering to something which is not me, which means it's not a choice. It's a foregoing of the opportunity to choose. They both look the same, but there's something very, very different going on. Because in one, I'm losing who I truly am, and the other, I'm becoming who I truly am. Choice means the ability to actualize self. That would be a better definition of choice. Choice is the opportunity to actualize self. When I do the wrong choice, I'm losing that self. When I make the right choice, I'm doing it. So that's a very short, but it's yeah. But again, it's at supermarkets near you, right next to National Enquirer. You can
So yourself in everybody has to be good.
The self, yeah, because the neshama. The neshama is the root of the self. Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
Most people don't realize the lunar moon, the value of it on human.
Say part louder, please.
The lunar moon,
Yeah.
tiny. Most people don't realize it affects human being because the cycle of birthing is 10 months lunar months. And when women go to the doctor, he gives that when she's going to the delivery. He just count 10 months of lunar months and gave the date. When
Maybe say 40
baby.
weeks.
The Chinese do it differently, but that's a different
Huh?
story. The Japanese do it differently, but that's a different story.
Free will and choice the same?
Yeah, the free will and choice of the genuinely choosing means I have the freedom to decide what I'm doing, not based on the past.
So it's not based on this?
Exactly. I mean, the past is an influence and is a factor, but I have to be able to stand above that and say, I'm doing this because it's the right thing, not because. Because if you say because of, then it's not a choice, it's being caused. Choice is, the language is, I'm not reacting, I'm acting.
You're acting, you're
You're
not
acting.
reacting.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's the language.
Doesn't the Bechira doesn't traditionally mean choice like Am HaNivchar is chosen from amongst other nations, no? So, in terms of here, it would signify that it is.
When you're dealing with God, yeah, okay, fine.
Right, but do you have a way to explain that in Bechira, in the actual term Bechira?
Well, you could also use the same way I'm saying, because the whole point of Am HaNivchar is because the Baruch is actualizing his expression in the world.
You're saying essentially he's not choosing between different things.
With that, again, you're getting. I'm trying to minimize the fear per lecture. It's like yeah.
Just, what does it mean that God says I'm bringing the chatas?
What?
What does it mean that God Himself brings
So
the
the
chatas?
Maharal explains the word kapara
But the Gemara
actually means cleaning things up. It doesn't mean atonement. It means to clean things up or to resolve things.
Okay.
So what it really means is by bringing our ability to be a korban chatas means our ability to do tshuva resolves our difficulties. We said you took something away from us, and the resolution is no. I gave you a much more essential expression of me than what you had before. That's the resolution.
Because you're part of it. Because we're actually part in.
Because in
determining.
choosing, I resemble God on a far more profound and fundamental level than when I simply look like Him.
Right.
It's a much more profound. In other words, much more profound.
Chet and sinning is a very profound essence of.
If we couldn't sin, then we couldn't do tshuva. That's the point. And in tshuva, that's where. Yeah. But the question you can ask is, if all this is so, then why is it that the Kadosh Baruch Hu commanded him not to do it? That question should have been asked. So the answer to that, I think, is very simple, which is that the root of Ahava, the one that we chose, is very long, and it's very painful. And a parent does not. The first version would have been sufficient to justify creation. God will not choose that route for us. You want to do it? That's your business.
We chose this route.
We chose the route. We chose Ava over Yira.
Is that the right choice?
Thank you.
Actually, it was. But that already starts getting us into problematic areas.
Right.
But it's not, you can't say it's the right choice. But the cheshbon that went behind the choice was correct, which was that Adam understood that I will glorify God on a more profound level if I go this way rather than the way He commanded me. So his cheshbon for making it was correct, but it doesn't seem like what he did was wrong because God said no, right? But ultimately, as if you think about it, it has to be the case, the world will come to a deep resolution as a result of that choice.
So what I meant to ask is when Adam chose to sin, right, was that a reflection of his inner self, which means that even before it was his inner self? So that...
Well, you see from the fact that effectively HaKadosh Baruch Hu consoles Adam, consoles the moon for making himself small on some level in the context of this medrash, don't quote me on this, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu effectively acknowledges that within the context of creation as it was created, Adam was in it. There's no question that Adam actually solved a very real problem by doing what he did.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very interesting medrash in that way, because on some level you see HaKadosh Baruch Hu acknowledging almost, it would be too strong to say the inevitability of the sin. It would be too strong, but it wouldn't be, it would be too strong, but it wouldn't be inaccurate.